Now, this group of young men, recruited from the higher levels of British society, were unofficially called at that time Milner's Kindergarten. Of course, they were young men. They were coming up in politics and in banking, and they came from the finest families. But they called them Milner's Kindergarten because they worked very closely together, and they tutored them and helped them get into positions of authority, especially in government. Now, they were placed into the power centers of society, and eventually they became the round table organizations in each of those countries. And so they were the inner circle of a larger circle around them. Now, while reviewing all of this, it's important for us to keep in mind that the primary purpose of a secret society is to keep secrets. It's pretty obvious. But that means that one of their major objectives is deceit. You have to be deceitful if you're going to keep secrets, even if you simply say, I don't know, which Hillary Clinton, I was just informed, who probably attended the last Bilderberg meeting, but when they asked her on camera, did she attend the Bilderberg meeting, she said, I don't know anything about that. And I guess the reporter said, well, your husband attended the last one. And she said, oh, he did? I don't know anything about it. See? Well, anyway, that's what you'd expect. If you have an affiliation with a secret society, you better be prepared for a little bit of deceit or you're not a good member. Now, to the gullible public, these people deny their plans and their goals, obviously, because the public, for the large part, would not necessarily understand them in an approving way. So, they lie a lot, but when they speak to themselves in their own private papers and before conclaves which are expected to remain confidential, they often tell the whole unvarnished truth. And every once in a while, if you're researching all of their papers, you'll find a little gem, which I'm going to, like the one I'm going to read to you now. This one was written by one of Milner's Kindergarten. His name, you'll recognize, Arnold Toynbee. He's a renowned historian. He was a professor at the London School of Economics. He was a director of studies at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which was a front for the Round Table. He was a British intelligence agent and the author of that very famous 12-volume History of the World. It's called A Study of History, which extols the virtue of world government and collectivism. So he's a big guy. In November of 1931, in that issue of International Affairs, which was published as an insider publication just for members of that round table, this is what Toynbee said, and this is a gem. He said, I will hereby repeat that we are at present working discreetly, but with all our might, to wrest this mysterious political force called sovereignty out of the clutches of the local national states of the world. And all the time we are denying with our lips what we are doing with our hands, end quote. And that, of course, just makes sense. People want to go to the members of the Council on Foreign Relations and say, are you guys really planning world government and loss of sovereignty and so forth? Of course not, they say. Are you really planning to merge America, the United States with Canada and Mexico? Absurd. See, this is just part of the game, and you must understand it. Now, world government doesn't just happen by writing some articles or books. Only when people are in control of power centers of society can they bring about massive changes like this. Not scholarship, but power. It's not public opinion, but power. Power is the key, and the power centers of society are what amalgamate and give these people power over their citizens. Now, how this came about, Quigley describes this. It's very interesting what he says. How did this come about? He said, through Lord Milner's influence, these men were able to win influential posts in government, in international finance, and become the dominant influence in British imperial affairs and foreign affairs up to 1939. In 1909 through 1913, they organized semi-secret groups known as roundtable groups. We're covering the same ground here again. In the chief British dependencies and the United States. These still function in 8 countries. The task was given to Lionel Curtis, who established in England and each dominion a front organization to the existing local roundtable group. This front organization, called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, had as its nucleus in each area the existing submerged roundtable group. In New York, it was known as the Council on Foreign Relations and was a front for J.P. Morgan and Company. All right. At last we come to this ubiquitous Council on Foreign Relations. You hear more and more about it. Even increasingly now on the news, you'll say, and here is a word from so-and-so from the Council on Foreign Relations office. And the average gum-chewing public says, that sounds good. I wonder what that's all about. So increasingly, this phrase, CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, is becoming more and more at least common. People don't know what it is, but they've heard it. So it's no longer frightening when they hear it. So we are informed by Quigley and others that the Council on Foreign Relations was spawned by a secret society which still exists today, that it is a front for a roundtable group originally embodied in J.P. Morgan and Company, but now the Rockefeller Consortium, and that its primary goal is no longer the expansion of the British Empire, but global collectivism with control in private hands, administered in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are their words, not mine. Now, why is this important? It is important because the members of the Council on Foreign Relations are the rulers of America. Can I back that up? I think I can. Who are the members of the Council on Foreign Relations? It's a very long list. Actually, there's about 4,000 names. And it's available, by the way, if you write to the Council on Foreign Relations office on your own letterhead, especially if it's a corporate letterhead. So I'd like a copy of the annual report. You'll get it. I've been collecting these for many years, and in the back of each report, they have the list of the current members. And here's what I found. Let's start with presidents of the United States. Council members include Herbert Hoover, Dwight Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, James Carter, George Bush Sr., and William Clinton. Now, JFK once said that he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, but I've not been able to find his name on any of the membership lists. So he's confused over that. I guess he wanted to be, but never quite made it in. Now, former presidential candidate John Kerry is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And if anything should happen to President Bush, then Richard Cheney would become president, and he is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Secretaries of State, undoubtedly, to this group are more important than presidents, because the presidents often just take advice. I mean, there's so much going on. They've got their cabinet, and they've got people telling them what to do. And so the Secretary of State is a critical figure, a critical position in this New World Order. And so it's not surprising to find that just about every Secretary of State from the beginning has been a member of the CFR. Here's the list. Dean Rusk, Robert Lansing, Frank Kellogg, Henry Stimson, Cordell Hull, E.R. Stettinius, George Marshall, Dean Acheson, John Foster Dulles, Christian Herter, Dean Rusk, William Rogers, Henry Kissinger, Cyrus Vance, Edmund Muskie, Alexander Haig, George Shultz, James Baker, Lawrence Egelberger, Warren Christopher, William Richardson, Madeleine Albright, Colin Powell, and of course, Condoleezza Rice. The Secretaries of Defense, pretty important position if you're going to build a new world order and use coercion if necessary, include James Forrestal, George Marshall, Charles Wilson, Neil McElroy, Robert McNamara, Melvin Laird, Elliot Richardson, James Schlesinger, Harold Brown, Caspar Weinberger, Frank Carlucci, Richard Cheney, Les Aspin, William Perry, William Cohen, and Donald Rumsfeld. CIA directors: Walter Smith, William Colby, Richard Helms, Allen Dulles, John McCone, James Schlesinger, George Bush Sr., Stansfield Turner, William Casey, William Webster, Robert Gates, James Woolsey, John Deutsch, William Studeman, George Tenet, Porter Goss, and Michael Hayden. Now, some better-known corporations with CFR members at the board or chief executive levels, which means they exert dominance and, for all practical purposes, control over the policies of these large corporations. Now, this is a long list, and I'm not going to read to you any more than just the tip of the iceberg. But they include Atlantic Richfield Oil Company, AT&T, Avon Products, Bechtel Construction Group, Boeing Company, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Chevron, Coca-Cola, and Pepsi-Cola, Consolidated Edison of New York, Exxon, Dow Chemical, DuPont Chemical, Eastman Kodak, Enron, Estee Lauder, Ford Motor, General Electric, General Foods, Hewlett-Packard, Hughes Aircraft, IBM, International Paper, Johnson & Johnson, Levi Strauss & Company, Lockheed Aerospace, Lucent Technologies, Mobil Oil, Monsanto, Northrop, Pacific Gas and Electric, Phillips Petroleum, Procter & Gamble, Quaker Oats, SBC Yahoo, Shell Oil, SmithKline Beecham Pharmaceuticals, Sprint Corporation, Texaco, Santa Fe Southern Pacific Railroad, Teledyne, TRW, Southern California Edison, Unical, United Technologies, Verizon Communications, Warner Lambert, Weyerhaeuser, and Xerox, to name just a few. Now, in the media, pretty important place to be if you want to control public opinion, we find CFR members in management and operational positions at the following media corporations: the Army Times, Associated Press, Association of American Publishers, Barron's, Boston Globe, Business Week, Christian Science Monitor, Dallas Morning News, Detroit Free Press, Detroit News, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, New York Post, San Diego Union Tribune, Times Mirror, Random House, W.W. Norton and Company, Warner Books, American Spectator, Atlantic, Harper's, Farm Journal, Financial World, Insight, Washington Times, Medical Tribune, National Geographic, National Review, New Republic, New Yorker, Newsday, Newsmax, Newsweek, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Reader's Digest, Rolling Stone, Scientific American, Time Warner, Time, U.S. News and World Report, Washington Post, ABC, CBS, CNN, NBC, PBS, RCA, and the Walt Disney Company. Did we leave anybody out? I don't think so. Not on the list yet. Could be, though. I just didn't locate it.
American Free Press?
Pardon?
American Free Press?
I'm going to check into those guys. All right, the media personalities, the talking heads. Not so important, but still important. David Brinkley, Tom Brokaw, William Buckley, Peter Jennings, Bill Moyers, Dan Rather, Diane Sawyer, Barbara Walters, Katie Couric, and Andrea Mitchell, wife of Alan Greenspan. And by the way, Greenspan, in case you were wondering, former chairman of the Federal Reserve System, is a member of the CFR. Labor unions with CFR members in key positions at the top include AFL-CIO, United Steelworkers of America, United Auto Workers, American Federation of Teachers, Bricklayers and Allied Craft, Communications Workers of America, Union of Needle Trades, and Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers. In the tax-exempt foundations and the think tanks, which often create policies which the government then implement, the number of CFR members in controlling positions is 443, as of my last count. Could be more, could be less today, but it's in that range. Some of the better-known names are the Sloan and Kettering Foundations, the Aspen Institute, the Atlantic Council, Bilderberg Group, Brookings Institute, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the Carnegie Foundation, Ford Foundation, Guggenheim Foundation, Hudson Institute, John and Catherine MacArthur Foundation, Mellon Foundation, Rand Corporation, Rhodes Scholarship Selection Commission, Rockefeller Foundation and Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Trilateral Commission, and the UN Association.